Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences about our encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise. Journalistic research on real cases by A.J. Parr.
We were the first group to study near-death experiences in children at Seattle Children's Hospital. We interviewed every survivor of cardiac arrest over 15 years. And that's near death.
So I would like to ask you certain questions based on something that I've been thinking about for years. Why do people who have NDEs, as well as mystical experiences, as well as dreams, as well as hallucinations, why do they always see a different version of the spiritual world? For example, some people see Jesus, some people see Buddha, some people see Muhammad. Some people who see Jesus see a blonde Jesus, others see a Jesus with black hair. Some see Jesus with sort of dark skin, others see Jesus with white skin. So it seems like being in this three-dimensional world, we are forced to translate or to interpret this, what we are experiencing, unconsciously.
So they're perceiving something, and then each person is struggling to understand it and to describe it in the terms that they can understand. One young man that we interviewed, these stories are so, he was digging a hole on the beach, just as my kids have done, just as I did when I was a kid. And he dug it, and it's so big, and he jumped in it, and the walls collapsed, and he was almost suffocated and had a cardiac arrest. And he told me that he sort of floated out of his body, but he was tethered to his body as well. So that when they put him in the ambulance, he sort of perceived himself as following, sort of above the ambulance, but being sort of tethered to his body. Like, it reminded me back in the old days when they used to talk about the golden cord that connected the soul to the body. He didn't describe a golden cord, but it's sort of like that. But so then he says to me that a wizard came to him and told him, "Struggle and you shall live." Well, that's the first time he told the story. Then when I interviewed him a little later, he told me that he had subsequently learned that it was Jesus, that it wasn't a wizard at all. And this is because he shared the experience with his parents, and his parents, and so then that's the cultural conditioning that comes in. And I think that this even goes further. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, I can.
Okay, this is a young girl. She nearly died of cardiac arrest. These creatures or figures that are around her, she said, were her classmates. And this figure in the bottom left was her teacher, her living teacher. She was alive. Well, her classmates and her living teacher, in fact, did not visit her at all. But that's just another example of what, she's struggling to understand this. She doesn't have any relatives who've died. Really, her family is really typical American family without any strong religious beliefs. What's the most important figure in her life? I think for an adult, it might be Jesus. For her, it was her living teacher. And that's who she told us was there to facilitate her experience. But why are spiritual experiences so difficult to find a commonality? Remember the little boy with the noodle? he said to me about his experience, he said, but what is it real? He said, because if it was real, you got to tell all the old people. But this reality, AJ, is the created reality. You're not seeing, what is this reality? This reality involves that your body has biological sensors which are picking up the electromagnetic field, and we're taking that electromagnetic signals, and then we're translating it into the visual, the auditory, and we're creating this internal reality. And that's what is reality. This is the hallucination, if you will. It's not a hallucination. Hallucination is a dysfunction of the brain. It's the proper function of the brain, but this is the invented reality. And I'd like to go back to what you were saying before. You're saying, well, it seems so puzzling about this heaven. Everybody seems to see a different heaven. Well, everybody sees a different color red. You don't see the same color red that I do. However, when we're between 2 and 3 and 4 years old, our parents spent hours instructing us on what red means as a common feature of this shared invented reality. And so they're just constantly saying, that's red, that's red, that's red, that's red. Well, we would all have the same understanding of spiritual experiences as well if we spent the same amount of time educating each other as to what is this spiritual reality. But we don't. So that's why each person is, one person says it's a doctor with light bulbs, and it's another person that says, no, it was just, it was my living teacher. And the third person said, no, it's my dead grandmother. That because we don't have that shared perception. But we don't go anywhere when we die. Our brain dies, and then we return to oneness. The oneness that we know is that, the physicists call it non-local. So sometimes I think it's better to think in terms of different dimensions and such as that, to think of local reality, which is this invented reality that we all share, that's created by our biological sensors, that's created by the neurochemicals in our brain. It's ironic that people say, oh, the near-death experience is just created by neurochemicals. This whole conversation is created by neurochemicals. Everything that we perceive is created by neurochemicals. I don't think that that's the standard of what is real or not. This is the local reality, and then there's non-local reality. It's a place where time and space doesn't exist. And time and space are inventions of our biological brain. How else could we have these kinds of conversations? How else could we learn our lessons of love, AJ, unless we had time and space? But we know from the children have near-death experiences who've seen this non-local reality, they tell us. I say, well, how long did your experience take? The child said, well, it could have been a second, or it could have been my lifetime, meaning that time didn't exist in that arena, that domain that they're in. And yet we know it's real. As a child told me, it's realer than real. This is the invented reality. I think that a child told it to me best. She described this after she died. This is Katie. Her real name is Crystal Merslock. She said, after she died, I wasn't dead. I wasn't dead at all. Some part of me was still alive. So that's what happens. Our brain dies. And so that, of course, this shared reality disappears. And of course, it's disorienting and strange because we're still conscious. And we're in an all-informational domain. Suppose this universe consists of information. Suppose it's an all-informational domain. And there's reason to believe this, because we know, for example, there's definitely a mathematical basis to the universe. Mathematicians, now can even have mathematical formulas which demonstrate the way trees grow, the way plants, put out leaves and such. If there's a mathematical basis for reality, whatever this consciousness, this oneness you're talking about, there's no reason it wouldn't have patterns. It's no reason it wouldn't contain information. And we as human beings are just information. That's all we are. We're our memories, we're our perceptions, our dreams, all of that is information. And that's eternal. It doesn't surprise me that mediums can get in touch with someone who is, no longer biologically exists. The information still exists. Why wouldn't it? Where would it go? I mean, it's eternal. And of course it would continue to exist. We just have to broaden our understanding of knowledge. None of the scientists I know disbelieve this kind of stuff. And the science of the 21st century is that 3/4 of reality we can't perceive.
Yes.
And yet it's still made of the same stuff that this reality is made of. It's still made of subatomic particles. The subatomic particles have different spins, to be sure, but they're still within the family of, quarks and muons and, all the different types of subatomic particles. I mean, we can only perceive a small fraction of all the different wavelengths of light there are. But we can't perceive 3/4 of the matter that scientists tell us exists. So that's a lot of space for people to continue to exist after they die in this reality. That's a lot of space for angels to exist. That's, so-called disincarnates. Maybe they're not disincarnates at all. What we call matter is actually energy. The thicker clumps of energy than we perceive as matter. When we look at these subatomic particles, the particles themselves then become better understood as waveforms, as energy. But even more mysterious, they no longer cease to exist. They become probabilities. They become mathematical concepts. So at the very deepest level of what we call matter is really just probabilities, and probabilities that only become fixed when we actually perceive them, that everything isn't real until we perceive it. Well, I'm going to tell you some interesting cases. I had a patient, and the doctors at the University of Washington had done ultrasounds of this mother of her baby in utero and determined that it had no brain. And this was by the latest state-of-the-art ultrasounds. They did not make a mistake. And yet these parents refused to believe it. And every time I saw them in the office, they were like, what do doctors know? Can you believe we went up to the University of Washington. They told us some BS that our baby didn't have a brain. We don't believe that. We don't believe that for a minute. And sure enough, when that baby was born, it had a brain. Now, is that a real life example of that they simply refuse to believe the one perception of reality, and that when they actually experienced for themselves, we know that, for example, scientists do something called a double slit experiment, which predicts the movement of subatomic particles through space. And we know that it's the perception of the observer that changes the results of the experiment.
Yes.
Is this just some sort of, that's on the, the subatomic level, but could that same thing be true in this shared reality? That, and that's not the only case that I've seen like that. And they always have the characteristics in which people just simply refuse to believe what other people believe. And then when they observe it for themselves, they observe it as they themselves determine it to be. I can think of, half a dozen such cases, and every physician has seen such cases. We just don't know what to do with them.
It's been great having you, Dr. Morse, and I want to have you back here soon, if I may.
I'm looking forward to it. I think that we'll eventually come to new understandings of this information. The information that you have is, I think, so important to be integrated with the near-death research. We've just started to understand what this information means for humankind and how we can live our lives differently. And I see your research is playing a big part of that.
Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences about our encounters with God, Jesus, and Paradise. Journalistic research on real cases by A.J. Parr. On sale now on Amazon.
I looked down, there's no body, there's no me, but I felt just like me. And my first thoughts was, wow, this must be heaven. The whole Bible, Jesus, God thing, it's really true. And I said, if you were praying and you talk to God, it's just like that. It's God, you need to send people back so they can tell people it's real. Send some back. They have no idea this is real.
So there was quite a bunch of activity that they were doing during this time. And so, I know they were working on me really hard, but the whole time that I was gone, I went to heaven. So as far as what I was experiencing, it was wonderful, and I was able to see God and to see Jesus.
I turned and I said to this one leader character who had come and collected me, I said, who are you? Who are you exactly? You're not the same as these, because he was not the same as the other angels. And he seemed to be the one that was emanating this incredible love more than anyone else. And he just looked at me and said, I am the one you call Lord. Now, for me, there's only one person in all of history that I call Lord, and that's Jesus. And, this was Jesus that I was sitting in front of. And that really did overwhelm me at that point.
I remember feeling all this light, seeing light all around me. And I was just like, when you're in a deep state of meditation, yes, when you go so deep that you don't see what's around you, you just become one with the light. So yes, that's what happened to me. I became one with the light.
At that point, I was turned upward, my spirit was, and I was aiming towards the sky. And I saw a beautiful, bright white, but it isn't a white that we can describe. So it's the brightest light you could imagine here on Earth, but without being blinding.
I cannot die right now. Will you take me back? I have a lot to do right now. I said, no, you make a promise to me and you need to fulfill your promise. So welcome to heaven. From today, you're part of me and part of all of them. From today, you start walking with me and walking with all of them. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that's what I'm going to unite the whole humanity again. And then he said, okay, he put his hands around me and said, let's do a live review.
I just really became fascinated with the light and became just the joy and the love of God and just the peace of God just began to wash over me. And I just began to look at my arms, and it's not a light like you just turn on. I mean, this light had like particles. It was just like moving and just covering my arms and my body.
When I was enveloped with that bliss and joy, at first it was all just a bright, warm light. And then it started to like settle down and take form. And it felt like I was in a cathedral, maybe with the marble walls and high ceiling or something, but it was still kind of misty looking. And I know that I had looked over to the right and I saw a good size, like an architect's table with a great big huge book, like a huge Bible or something, open about halfway. And I remember somebody telling me what was in that book, and I believe it was my life, and I was only halfway through.
Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences about our encounters with God, Jesus, and Paradise. Journalistic research on real cases by A.J. Parr. On sale now on Amazon. Stairway to Heaven.